rules that we usually have. And regarding the timing, we are planning to have this session for 1 hour and 20 minutes overall time. And yes, I guess we can start, not to lose a lot of the time and leave the people entering as they come. So I welcome you on this new edition of the Post-COVID Talks with Experts. This is the series of digital events organized and promoted by Youth to Youth Initiatives and Rubik's Potential. And we are very happy to introduce you the latest edition devoted to the digitalization. The topic we already started last time. I would like to dig a little bit deeper on certain things. And in the face of huge societal changes, the question we need to ask ourselves is, how can digital transformation actually make a positive contribution? And it's been already a lot of debates among policymakers, economists, industry leaders, and inside the society about its impact. And as the digitalization disrupts society ever more profoundly, concern is growing about how is it affecting issues such as jobs, wages, inequality, health, our leisure time, and our future potential. And to begin with this conversation, I would like to introduce you or would like to give awards to two of our guest speakers who gladly agreed to participate and elaborate a little bit on the questions that we prepared. So I'm happy to give a word to Chenchao Liu to introduce himself briefly about his background and how is he related to the topic of digitalization. Thank you.
Hey everybody, thank you for the invitation. My name is Chenchao Liu. I'm 31 years old, originally from China, living in Germany now for 18 years. I work in healthcare, a lot to do also with the digital health topic currently. I studied chemistry and worked as a consultant 2 years after graduation. And in 2017, I formed my own company, focused very much on digital healthcare and healthcare in general, collaboration between Germany and China, Europe and China. And did many projects for pharmaceutical, medical devices, and also government. I was with Ministry of Health in China, German Ministry of Health in China, to also foster dialogue between the two countries in healthcare. So this is what I do.
Thank you so much for your introduction. Now I'm gonna give a mic to Fabian Rang to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Also, hello from my side. My name is Fabian. I'm also living in Germany. Coming from a total different perspective. Sound already very interesting what you said about digital healthcare. Myself, I'm actually an engineer. That was like over the last 5 years, I got more and more into the digitalization, into informatics, mathematics, and I found my own company 2 years ago about optimization. So I'm really deep into math and how we can apply mathematics, which nowadays is also called AI, in application. So especially for engineering. And this is what I'm doing, where I'm doing my PhD also at the moment, just to see how we can apply optimization approach, mathematics or AI in companies that are probably not using it too much or that are using it, but they want to leverage it even more. Happy to talk today.
Saida, are you still on mute?
Sorry. So I said, thank you so much for the introduction and welcome to this conversation. We're very happy to have you today. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time. We'll jump to the first question, which is connected to health, the area which suffered a lot after the COVID-19 situation and still going through some kind of transformation. So it's interesting to hear your opinion about the impact of the digitalization on the health management system. We can start with that. Whoever feels comfortable to start can start. Thank you.
I could start before the expert talks. So yeah, I just want a little disclaimer, like all of the things I say, obviously it's only my view on the digitalization, and it is very bound to what I do. So to automation and mechanical approach to the whole topic. So just for you as a little disclaimer. And I think from what I saw also about COVID now and what we saw before, like about what digitalization can do and what it can't, like obviously in Germany, for those that are not in Germany, here it is very slow, a lot of digitalization parts, but I think it has huge potential, like especially in three areas. One is like we had a project together with actually also in China, which was super interesting. It was about digital healthcare. When you look at doctors, like a lot of people, they don't have access directly to doctors, to advisors, and with these called doctor calls that they do there, they already approach this, that you say you can also give, especially to rural areas, people access to better medical health care. Like this is, I think, a first big topic. And the second one, which is more like from the AI side, is that I think that if you look at what AI really can do, is I think the best thing it can do, it can support people to perform better on their jobs, especially when you look at doctors, for example. Like if you can make a better pre-selection about who is sick, or you can categorize earlier, you only have a flu, this is your medication. So doctors could much more focus on the real important cases in the hospital, for example, rather than having to have 10 patients on one day. They only have 3 because the other 7 could be pre-categorized or pre-analyzed by a digital algorithm. This is, I think, a second mainly impact. And the last one is more mechanical. Like I think in hospitals, I read a book, it's called the Checklist Manifesto. It's written from a doctor, and it's saying like you can reduce a lot of mistakes just by introducing checklists. And I think taking it to the next step, like going more into digitalization, helping stressed people like nurses, doctors, with digital devices to check more things or to have more things in mind without actively being focused on them, can also help to just minimize even more mistakes and saving lives in this area.
Thank you. And Chenchao, would you like to add something to that or elaborate on this point? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think in general, to not to deep dive to the specific technology itself, I think digitalization in the healthcare system is more about democratization, right? And it's give the power back to the patients who are actually the bone of everything, you know, because everywhere in the world, the majority should have to say. And until now, you know, everything, at least talking about from German perspective, is not very transparent. And as a statutory insured, you don't often know, okay, how much, what cost, what did doctor do to me, which prescription. So everything is kind of invisible. There's partially it's a luxury problem because most of the procedures are reimbursed by the insurance. That's why you don't need to know because the cost is covered. But on the other hand, it makes the system not very effective, and all these decisions are not made on the best interest of the patients. Digitalization makes sure that processes are more transparent, and transparency brings more accountability. For doctors means if they have done mistakes, they have to stand to it, right? Everybody does. It's not, you know, an issue, but it should be more transparent, and also to reduce costs. You know, you don't have to prescribe something that you only need to do one. And yeah, so I think everybody can have better record about what has happened in my medical record, and to also give better treatment and save money for the taxpayer at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for your comprehensive answer. it's clear that the health management system would be under, it's already under huge impact of digitalization and actually going through transformation, and it will require even more investment in this regard. But what is your opinion about the other areas that will be most likely going through this kind of digital transformation? And what do you think will be that they will be changing? Which aspect of their operation or the way they look presented into the society will be changed? So can you name those certain areas that you believe are the most easy for the transformation, or will be absolutely necessary transformed? Thank you.
Hi folks, sorry, I was having issues with my internet connections.
Okay, welcome everyone who just joined. Yeah, we already started the conversation, and giving the word to Fabian, if you would like to elaborate on the second question.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Like for work-wise, when you just look on a work perspective, I think logically it is like white-collar work as we know it right now. Like if you look at engineering or also law, then you can see that a lot of things that people do, including myself, is that you do a lot of repetitive work, which is like very time-consuming, but it doesn't really generate new stuff. And it's elaborating data, it's in law, it's elaborating judges, looking at the case and seeing what's going on to better understand what the outcome of the case is or to win a case. But I think that most of this work will be automated over the next 15 years, so that the people working in this area can much more focus not on doing this process that I mentioned, but then focus much more on driving new things forward, like going more in research, or as a lawyer, going much more in shaping new laws for our new society, rather than trying to use the law that we have to win or lose cases. And I think this will, I'm not sure, but I think from an automatization point of view, this is much more likely than robots cleaning the street or everything. I think it will come also somehow, but I work for a company where we want to implement a robot, and you have so many regulations. Like it's so hard to implement a robot, for example, that is not in a cage. So, and for algorithm that you can put on every computer, it's like the threshold is much lower, even that the technology you require is much higher. So I think that from a work perspective, this point will be huge. And from my personal perspective, like for our personal lives as well, I really love the topic about digital interaction, like not virtual reality, it's more like mixed reality. So I saw some videos like you can interact with your environment a bit more. And I think especially in times like now, perhaps it also helps to get more in these virtual meetings. It helps perhaps the next times as well to get closer to people again, even if you can't see really. I know it's a bit far away, but I think still it's going to be a huge topic for our whole, for our global society.
Do you think it's going to be used a lot in such sphere as education? Or there are different application spheres?
I'm not sure. Like my imagination there is limited, because like always when I look at big inventions, like back in the days, what people imagined what they will cause and what they really caused was like so different. And since then I'm always a bit cautious about my fantasy letting prognosis there.
All right. I cannot see our second speaker. Can you?
You're gone.
Well, I hope it's just a temporary connection issue. Could you, Michelle, maybe?
Yeah, it's, maybe he comes back when the connection.
Otherwise, the pressure is on you, Fabian. You'll have to take care of both of the areas.
Oh, we
Try to reach out him by the phone, guys.
Yes,
Thank-
it's the same as the last time. Every time we talk about digitalization and possibilities, the same thing with the speakers that they don't have connection.
Okay, so maybe while we waiting for him to reconnect, maybe you can give us an overview about. It's also very broad, you know, as we would think about digitalization as some kind of a pathway for the global society to go somewhere one day. It's like, you know, those industrial revolution that used to change and shape the you know, industries and behaviors and the way societies work. So in terms of the current digitalization, where do you think it's going to take us as a society globally? Is there any definite direction based on your opinion, obviously? Thank you.
There's no 100% direct direction. Like, it's more a hope. Like, I have like two hopes. Like, and I think the probability that it's gonna happen is kind of high. So the chance is there, but I really hope that it really takes us more together as a whole social society, like globally, instead of tearing us apart. Like, because we can communicate all over the world. We can get in touch with people all over the world. I mean, what we're doing right now is exactly this, and I really love it. And at the other side, what I hope is that we can create much more data-driven decisions, like, which, when I look, especially in my area, how decisions are made, it's like normally you think, oh, it's clear he should do this decision, but he doesn't, because it's a very emotional-driven decision. And I think that globally, especially the problems we're facing, we need much more transparency in our decision processes, which is enabled by more digitalizing, by data and everything. But also we need to base it much more on digital data. It doesn't need to be digital. Digital is just more, it's the medium that can transfer it much better all over the world to make it accessible. So this is actually the 2 points where I think would be awesome. But yeah, like we see, it can also cause the indirect way when you look at Facebook and how societies spread and separate, also because of fake news and everything. So yeah, like everything has its pros and cons, and it can actually, social media can do good and bad at the same point. So that's why it's a hope. I'm not 100% sure.
Thank you so much for sharing the opinion. And guys who is joining us, who joined later, we just wanted to encourage you to drop your questions either in the chat or keep them till the end of the conversation, so we can have your questions answered. And yes, we'll be moving to the next question, since I don't see Chenchao joining. The question is, well, you probably already observed that digitalization touched different countries in a different way. There's obviously not equal, would say equal, the process doesn't spread equally globally. So my question is, what difference can you observe in different countries when it comes to digitalization?
Yeah, I really love that question, because like it's I do it next to my research. Like, I had a lot of touch points with it. Like, looking, like in Germany, we always complain that our internet is slow and everything. And just seeing like how other countries and our cultures as well, like, push it for different reasons. But also like how it enables, especially in poorer countries, I think it really enables people, for example, to have an ID, to have a bank account, to stay in contact, to start new businesses. It's like, I think that especially in poorer countries, it's really offering a lot of new chances, while I think in countries like Germany, or also when you look to USA and China, probably, that it's more driven also by society to push it forward, like as a society, even if the KPIs are different. Like, if you look, I don't know if the Chinese government and the German government have the same goals when digitalizing, but I think there are some overlaps. There are some points that may be different. But for me, especially looking at the microdynamics in poorer countries, like I looked at it from another point of view. It was about CO2 emission, and to see like in Africa that a lot of CO2 is emission by people burning stuff to charge their phones. It was crazy because I realized, okay, the phone is like the center of their life. I mean, for a lot of people here, this as well. But for them, it enables them, for example, a farmer to research how to better do his crop, to really yield or have better farming experiences. And I think this is like, especially for poorer countries, it can really give a boost of information, which is like, we don't know this problem because we always have like access to all information in Germany. But I think this is a really nice thing, especially for these kind of countries.
Thank you so much for this answer. I think it's going to be, it's going to be interesting also to hear. Maybe some of the participants would like to share their input in the chat box. About the digitalization in their country. So maybe we can have this short live discussion and at the end of the questions coming from myself and Michelle. It would be interesting to see how the digitalization touched your country or your region. And we're moving to the next question prepared is also rather broad question, but I think it's important because before COVID-19, the topic of the climate urgency was very was at the top of all the headlines, and then suddenly, we all switched to the healthcare issues and the concerns regarding the economic consequences of the COVID and all the travel bans and restrictions and new normal. But the environmental questions and problems didn't go away. So in terms of, I know that people working in environmental sphere, they also looking into the ways of digitalization of their work. And basically, what is the role of digitalization, in your opinion, in environmental sustainability? How actually it can help us to get to the sustainable environment policy?
Yeah, it's an area like the research with the coal that I just said to charge your phone. Like, besides the fact that of course you need a lot of energy and you do CO2 emission by digitalizing our world. I see it as a great chance because with digitalization we can make better climate models computer based. We collect much more data that we can share worldwide with like national research institutes worldwide. And I think this whole thing about transparency, like I think that if we want to get to a sustainable state, like it needs to be globally. And if we want everyone to participate in this game, we also need to have a transparency about who has which emissions, who does what. And I think that this is a super nice vehicle to go through. Like, if you look at companies like Spire, for example, they do satellite pictures, and you can perfectly see like where, for example, forest is burned, where more forest is burned. But you can see it if you can also process the data to perhaps say out of this, okay, we should start to pay the farmers where most of the forest is burned, because obviously they need money to have more, to grow more beef. It could be also a very nice way to act much faster than we do now, and to act much more efficient. Like, because right now we have like 1,000 things that in mind what we could do, but we have no idea which are the best points to start with. And I think by digitalizing more this analysis process and taking the data as a whole, like as a whole system, and looking at it as a whole system, could really help us to still achieve the goals that we have, and to don't pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius limit, or 2 degrees.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, that will help. This is the priority for all of us as a global society. And Um, as we already started to talk about this big areas of where digitalization comes and shapes and transfers its surface or the mechanism, how this area work, we talked about the health industry, environmental aspects. What about economy as a broad? So what will the economic impact of innovation be in the future? What do you, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the thoughts, like I said before in the beginning, that if you have new innovations or you have a new groundbreaking technology, if you take digitalization perhaps as a whole, and already looking at Amazon, Microsoft, and all companies evolving from this new technology, it's modern technology. I think it's very similar to when you ask people like some 100 years ago about electricity. Like nobody had an imagination about what it would boost, and that computers would come out of like the invention of electricity. So the only thing I'm absolutely sure about is that everything about the impact it will have is much bigger than we think about. Like it will be much bigger than everything we saw until now, obviously. But yeah, I think it's an exponential growth, and we're like in the beginning of yeah, a hockey stick, like you always say in the startup world, you know. But it's just a feeling. So, and just the feeling about looking back to the past, what new invention always brought. Because if you open one new door, obviously you have 10 new doors that you can open. And I think this is the same. We just start to realize what we can do with data. We just realize where we collect data. I mean, it's the big data. We people don't know what to do with this stuff. But I think there will be a point where they will, and this is where it gets really interesting. Then I think we get to the next level.
That's very exciting. Actually, looking forward to these times, and I think a little bit more specific questions will be coming from Michelle, especially on the data, as I know she prepared some, and I'm giving her opportunity to continue the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saida. So we have a very special day today with everything going on also on the other side of the world. Just pointing out the elections in America that are currently undergoing. And there we have still letters that are sent for the election, which I find very interesting. And at the same time, there's also the possibility to go for elections online, especially also in COVID times. So digital technologies, they provide a lot of new opportunities to also attract citizens to participate in social and political processes. Also, in one of our first talks, it was just when the Black Lives Matter movement was going on. That's also something we discussed, and the role that digitalization played in there. Now just shifting the question a little bit and asking, like, as traditional democratic processes, the ones offline and with letters like in America, for example, they can be transferred into the digital part. So what does the future promise us with regards to e-democracy and also e-government?
I'm not too much into politics, but regarding like also what you see now with the voting via post, and like I think it's a huge trust issue. Like I mean, younger generations, including us probably, we have much more trust in digital devices. It's much more native for us. So what I really could think about that, but if I talk to my mother, for example, and I would tell her I could vote via an SMS or via WhatsApp message, she would say I'm crazy because it's not safe. And actually, you see the same with only letters. Like even people there, like thousands of people go on the street and say stop this counting of letters, for example. And it's super interesting because I think when there's no consensus about it, if there's no trust in the digital system, it will be very hard for e-democracy or e-government on one side. But what I really hope and what I could think about what would be cool, like a bit also future with mixed reality stuff, but if you could get back to this, what I think in the internet is like also political discussions, like it's very rude often, like it's getting very fast, like very hard. And I think this is the case also because people don't see the, like if I tell you in your face a bad thing and I see your reaction, probably I won't do it again. And I think if we get our discussions, like our political discussions, more to real life in a electric way, however it works, I think we could come back to a much better discussion culture again, which would be cool and I think really helpful as well for our democratic system.
Definitely. Thank you for your perspective. And you also mentioned just before that we actually try to build robots and also combined it with the algorithm and with artificial intelligence. You also said that it's a lot easier to implement the different algorithms and the threshold is lower. So I would like to go into that direction a little bit more. And I, for myself, have recently started on a project that has more to do with also artificial intelligence. So I'm also wondering, as you are the expert on the digital part, what do you think, what will be the role that artificial intelligence will play in the future and in what areas?
It's a difficult one. It depends how you see artificial intelligence, I think. Like, I think that especially looking at personal lives, like if you look at performance and everything, I think that, for example, coming back to healthcare as well, like having tracking devices, for example, I have like an Aura ring, which tracks my sleep, having other devices, perhaps a smart mattress, whatever, or measuring your blood sugar, you could like really have algorithms helping you to better evaluate your body individually so that you perform better, that you sleep better, that you're less stressed perhaps. But on another scale, like looking at it, like you asked the question like very globally, or I don't know actually. Like I think what I said before, that we have so many data, I think starting to get more out of the data we have will be a very big point. But otherwise, I really don't know it, because like the artificial intelligence we're talking about, it's just mathematics. It's not this kind of films that we see, you know, and it's like, oh, the robot that can talk to you and it's nice. I mean, they can, but again, looking behind the scenes, there's this word, I really love it. It's called AAI, like it's called artificial intelligence. And most of the videos you normally see in the net it's very connected to this. They assume that it's an AI, but actually there's somehow a human or an interaction behind that still helps and triggers it, that the effect is somehow bigger. So that's why I always say, if it's written in Python, it's machine learning. If it's PowerPoint, it's AI. So I think that machine learning over the next years probably is going to have a bigger impact regarding the data and the analysis of the data, which you will really see, then perhaps AI. Depends how you see it. Okay? I think this is really important.
On that note, I'm just also curious. I think it was Google who had an AI project that they, at some point, they ended it because there were some results that they could not understand. Same as probably the algorithms were so complex at one point that a scientific person behind could not follow anymore. Have you heard of that? And if so, what would be your opinion?
I didn't heard of this example. I didn't hear of this example, but I mean it makes totally sense, because we as human, we are good in a lot of things, but we are really bad at a lot of other things, and especially when it comes to complex systems, to understand complex system behavior. I can totally understand that nobody understands what's going on. And especially if you start to train these machine learning algorithms or these AIs, and they get a lot of input from different areas, you don't understand what's going on. I mean, I have one nice example is you train an algorithm, an AI, to recognize gym bells, like, you know, the things to do gym. And afterwards they re-engineered it to see what the thing is thinking about how the object looks like. And it showed a hand with it, because there was no training where the hand was not on the photo, obviously, where a guy was working out or a girl. So the training of the AI caused that it said that the part of the arm is like part of the gym util, which it obviously not is, but which nobody knew until they really back engineered it. And I think this happens all the time. You know, it's a black box, and people like the results, and that's why they're using it. But it can shift very fast. That the results are based on some assumptions that nobody had in mind.
Oh, very interesting. I also know, and I guess a lot of these fears that maybe come from these AAI that you tell from the movies. But how do you think in real life humans will start to interact with the machines and algorithms? And is there a way, or do we need to be scared of them as human beings? And are there any skills that we can still learn that they cannot learn and that we should learn?
I start with the last part. I think this is what I said, also talking about white labor, perhaps being a bit changed by AI, is the creativity part and the really discovering new things part. I think this part is, you should always be open-minded to learn new things and to be very interested in doing creative things, and not too much focused on being good in these analytical things. I mean, it's very important as well. I love it, actually. I would be sad if some machines steal my job. But I think the creative thing, and also like bringing people together, by bringing people together, new ideas evolve. I think this kind of intelligence, like this group intelligence, group creativity, I cannot see it at the moment that this is like there's some AI that does it better, because what they always do, they learn from the past. We obviously do as well, but yeah, the future is different than the past, and I think we can adapt still much faster as a group. So I would not be worried at this point, and I think it's always important to be open-minded, to look at new things, to also from time to time also pushing to new things, because like always just repeating the stuff you do already well, this is the point that yeah, machines probably or perhaps can do one day better.
And in what way, you already said a little bit, but in what way do you think will the labor market for humans shift?
Yeah, like yeah, like from my feeling, I think that, because if you look, you always want to optimize something. If from another perspective, you want to save as much money as possible and to gain as much money as possible at the same time. So like I said, the robot things, they're highly expensive, you cannot implement them well. But if you look at algorithms, just installing something on your computer, let it be a little Excel macro or a little Python script, could already like save you half a day of some worker. So what I think is that work, like white collar work, is going to shift immensely, because these are normally the better paid people. So you have a higher delta, you can save, obviously. And at the other time, I think that you won't cut people like there, but the responsibilities of people will change. So your productivity will go up dramatically, because if you do, like, you have one work day, you do 50% of your work day things you're not good at, so you order data, whatever. 10% you really go deep into things you are already an expert in, for example. 30% of the day you do calls, whatever, and 10% you do lunch. But imagine you could extend these 10% to 60, because the 50% would just fall away. Like that, the experts get more expert in their field, and they interact much more with the machine. Like I always say, 1 + 1 does not always need to be 2. It can also be 3 if you play it smart. And that's what I'm thinking about future work. Like you have the expert and you combine it with a machine, that you take the best things that humans are good in and combine it with the things machines are good in to get better results in shorter time.
This is going to be very interesting also for the future then, on cooperating with machines while humans are still learning to cooperate with each other. So while
I like that one, yeah.
So yeah, I recently, as I said, started also to work on another project, and there are people who come back at me and they're very surprised how little data it actually takes to understand more of a human who's behind the screen. So kind of that we only need 100 data points to understand who a person is, and with 200 data points we know more than the person knows about themselves. So connected to this question, I would like to hear your point on, or your definition on, what exactly is big data, and how important is it in today's era, and how will it change?
Yeah, I mean, 200 data points is rather small data, right? But yeah, I heard about this as well. It's kind of scary as well how much others can know about yourself without even like just from some reactions. But yeah, I think like from a political point of view, it's kind of dangerous. Like when you go to politics, back to politics, also to e-politics perhaps, because you say the more you do electronically, the more you know about a person. You know, like it's a bit. In German we have a thing like the chicken egg problem. Like on one side, like you have a lot of opportunities, but on the other side, they cause also a lot of not problems in the first hand, but also risks. And I think it's the same with big data. Like, what is big data for me? First of all, big data is, for me, myself, it's only that you have massively amount of data. You don't need to do anything with it, but you have good data that you can use for analysis, whatever. And what I think that it is going to be important, like we said also already for the sustainability fact, I think with data you can much better control and understand where you can have an impact to control and to improve our ecological pathway. But I think in general also you can make much better decisions everywhere in your life. I don't think, if not everyone wants this and not everyone should do it just because data says. I mean, I know, like for example, having this Aura ring, I see, for example, when I should not eat late in the evening, because when I do so, I really see database that it's having a bad impact, while showering cold in the morning has a good impact on my sleep in the evening. So I think personally it can really help, but on a global scale, I think there's just so much improvement, and especially for decision making, like because rational decision making could improve like all people's life on the world. I think much better. But the way data are presented right now, it's so confusing. You know, I can understand people that say, I prefer to make a decision out of my gut, because I never saw a scatter plot with 5,000 data points. What the hell should I do with it? So I think it's still in a baby stage, because we don't understand what we can do with this data on a big scale, and how we can do this data transition to make it explainable for people, that people can do stuff with the data, because data on its own is nothing. You need people that do something with it, or that interpret it, or that base a decision on it that is good for everyone, or at least for a majority.
And so first of all, hi to everyone who joined a little bit later. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, or wait until the end, until Saida and I finished with our questions. Then you also have the opportunity to ask your own questions. Wow, so okay, for the big data, do you think there's gonna be a new generation, or do we already have some people amongst our generation, let's say, that are able and already learning enough to be able to present this data in little nuggets and easy to digest ways? Or do you think it takes at least one more generation until we're up to a level that we really can make good use of big data?
I think there are people already. that are for the amounts we have right now, like doing also well. Like there are a lot of startups doing cool things. Even Google just bought a startup that is like working a lot with this visualization, decision-making processes. But on the other side, I think the amount of data we just collect is going to grow exponentially. So perhaps the things we do right now are not, will be good in 2 to 3 years for the data we have today, but perhaps not enough for what we have in 3 years, who knows, or what we have in 10 years. So I think it's a very dynamic process, which requires super fast iteration and learning processes to really, be able to do something, see if it works, reiterating and seeing this again. I think otherwise we won't have a chance, but this is, again, looking back to skills, I think this is what people just need to love to learn. It's not being good only at one thing, but loving to learn new things and to see how my visualization perhaps, is it understandable for people, yes or no, and when no, why isn't it the case? And probably the best case, I have tomorrow a new visualization for you, and perhaps then you have you better understand what you could do with it. Like, I think it's more a mindset question than rather a skill that you have or you don't have.
Thank you. I would like to switch now from everything we heard that has a lot to do with economy and business in the professional part, and then some part of our private life, to something even more specific. And recently, I had a lot of discussions with people who start to have kids, or they are in school and they teach. So I just wonder, because they all tell me how much kids are also in this digital evolution. They're part of it, obviously. They have their phones, they have laptops, as you know, as you said, they are very good with these things. They grew up with it. So what is kind of this negative impact on children and also the parents that grew up completely without this whole digital evolution? How, in your eyes, how can they go along and also raise their kids maybe to be responsible or responsive, not responsible, I think it is, with these digital devices, and also in order to protect their mental health?
Yeah, it's funny because I think the way that education works, like also looking at my little brother, for example, I think that the roles change also, because you don't have only a parent like educating. Parents need to get much more in a learning position as well to understand what their kids are doing, because otherwise it's only like they don't understand what the kid is doing and you're like, don't do this, you're doing it too much, instead of like this. It's a bit of overprotection, but on the other hand, they don't really understand that social interaction, perhaps for younger people like my brother, there's a lot of social action, social interaction going on, perhaps in Discord or whatever. And I think it's a learning process that is by side, and that as a parent, especially, don't overprotect it. I don't have kids, so it's a bit hard to answer that question. But from what I see and what I know from my brother is that I think it's all a matter of amount and what you do, and the thing of awareness. So you always need to stay open-minded and try to understand that there are up and downsides of the technology, and I think you need to teach them, your kids as well. But I think you also need to better understand the technology on your own and what your kid does with it before you say, oh, it's bad that you're on the phone. Perhaps the kid did 5 hours math on YouTube, whatever. And the same is for social media, probably. I mean, you have a lot of upsides, like you meet a lot of people. You can have downsides when you get in groups, I don't know. But if you just use it in a healthy way, it's awesome. And perhaps even parents could participate in it. So I just don't like to say it's good or bad. Again, I think it's a way how we look at it, like that we always have a critical eye, and that we don't start that you say, oh, I blindly trust everything. And when I go on Google Maps, I always take this way. Because this is a thing I need to agree. Like if you look at digital things, me included, I think with a lot of things we should be much more cautious about doing alternative ways sometimes, also than in education, that not always, sometimes it's good to not take a phone and to just try to get from A to B by remembering the way, because it's super important for our brain, and this is how our brain evolved. I mean, the same with going out and looking not only on screens for your eyes is obviously good. So there are points that are scientifically proven, but I think parents should much more also try to get in the other position to really have a healthy relationship and education with their kids, than rather always going into a fight at this point.
Yeah, that's very interesting on what you say, that you also need to train your brain and just get from A to B without it. Because I also recently got asked to develop a training program for children on emotional intelligence, because basically also science has proven that kids nowadays have a lot more difficulties to recognize their own emotions or what's going on in another person, because their brain network is not trained anymore to recognize these small micro expressions, as they are mainly on the screen. What do you think should we do in order to either counter that or deal with it? And what's the future?
This was, I think, my first, the mixed reality answer. This is the big hope is that perhaps we can get this back, these emotions back, and because the future will be digital in a way. But I think getting this dimension, we are two-dimensional somehow, or perhaps three-dimensional, but getting much more this emotional dimension also in a virtual reality or in a mixed reality, to help also people not only to learn this, like you said now, for kids it's like harder to learn, but also for everyone just to have this interaction, even if you're not sitting in the same room. This would be awesome. And looking at, I don't know how much of these videos is fake, what you see, and how much is already like really in production, but I think that a lot of things really are going in this area, like away from this just flat screens, but much more about, it's about touching, it's about perhaps feeling, and everything. And I think this has all to do a lot with emotions and reactions and learning from reactions. Yeah, I mean, already doing a video call and seeing your reaction, saying something, is better than writing something and just seeing perhaps an emoji, which which isn't the case, which isn't your real face. Perhaps the emoji looks totally different, not only from the shapes, but also from the message that he transports.
Absolutely, thank you. So from our side, I guess we're through with our questions, and I would like to give the word back to Saida and to moderate then on the other questions that came from the audience.
Yes, thank you so much. It was super interesting and exciting conversation, and we would like to continue with the questions because we have Maya, and I was wondering, because Maya has several questions she dropped in our chat box, and I was wondering if you, Maya, would like to take a stand and ask these questions personally to Fabian, if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Saida. Thanks a lot for this interesting discussion. It's a really interesting theme. And I have several questions. The first one is about how digitalization influences on tourism sphere, because nowadays it's very important according to lockdown, and how it will be in digital world. What can we say about that?
I really love to travel analog, so I didn't think too much about digital, but regarding the fact that we need much better tracing systems, for example, or better seeing, if we want to save travel, I think collecting data on like a bit what we see already now with these apps, seeing if you were in contact with someone having corona, I think this is a first step getting back to normal. But I don't know if I understood your question right, actually. Like, is it more about traveling in general, or having a digital travel experience, or like, is it really, I don't know.
In that way, what do you think about that? How tourism sphere will change after that? Because most of them just using only digital technologies, like 3D like modeling in this way.
Yeah. I need to admit I have yeah, my creativity right now about tourism. I just like I have these pictures in my mind from a beach surfing, and I'm thinking I want to be there. But I I have no answer to that question. Sorry. Like just because I'm not into that topic at all. Sorry.
Okay. And what do you think about the digital technologies? Like it's really influenced on our new professions. A lot of majors just we can see that how to find out new professions, which of them will become more popular in spite of IT specialists, for example. What do you think?
If you look at like I said, I'm not actually. I came from engineering, so I learned it over the past 5 years on my own, more or less. And like the biggest learning for me was it's a bit equivalent to what I said for children, but it was that I think the most important skill or also profession, if you want to, I think there's not one profession you grow in anymore, but it's more you grow a skill set of different things you are good in to be able to learn yourself into new professions kind of fast. So saying there are new professions coming up in the next 5 to 10 years, you build your skill set up by just seeing what is new, perhaps learning new things because you like them, and then saying, okay, with my skill set I already have plus the thing I did at the moment, I could go into these 5 areas of professions. I think it's going to be like, especially for a lot of people, I think this is the better way to go, including myself, because in computer science, like every month you had data scientists, now you have data analysts, then you have decision maker analysts. Like the words are changing so fast that I think you cannot catch a word and say they're like these 5 new things. It's rather trying to make yourself as agile as possible and trying to always learn new things and learn how to learn. Like I think this is the best description, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. And the last one question, according for children, using a lot of time digital tools negatively influence on children's minds. And what do you think about sleep thinking? Maybe you heard about it, and I'm just working with trainings and masterclass with a young generation, and I see how it's very hard to work with them. For example, people in my age and with teenagers, it's very different minds and vision of life.
Could you give a brief definition of the thinking that you just said?
Sleep thinking.
Yeah.
When, for example, they don't like to read a lot of text, they don't like to write something. It's easier to them just watch the videos using new apps like TikTok or YouTube videos.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the book Deep Work from Carl Newport. I don't know if you know it. I read it 3 times. It's my absolute favorite book. And it's exactly about this point. Like he says that if you always have a phone, like if you always, if you don't have moments where you are really bored, which is important for the brain, you lose the ability to focus on things. And what's happening is that you read a text for 2 seconds and you're watching on your phone. Oh, you do something else, whatever. And I think this is exactly what you are seeing here as well. Like it's super hard, especially if you grow up with these things, to just focus on things. And I think it's one of the biggest problems we have in education, one of the biggest challenges, to see how we can get back to also teaching young minds how focus works. Like even for me it's hard. Like I practice every day to do this deep work. I prepare for it. I turn off my phone, I put it in another room. So I really create an environment for it. And I think, and this, he says this in the book as well, you need to train your brain to get bored. Like it needs to go 1 hour out and don't take your phone. Just get bored. Go to supermarket, stand in line and be bored for 5 minutes because the lady there is super slowly and you have to wait. But don't be in the line and watch YouTube videos, because your brain gets used to always get something. And if you read the text and the moment you get bored, you look at your phone. But the greatness that appears in human thinking is, after this being bored by reading a bit of the text, you go into a really deep dive within, and this is where learning takes place, when you're back to learning. And to really learn new things, to learn hard things, you need to be able to really focus on one thing, and especially to have this noise around. I always call it noise, like these little pop-up messages everywhere, to really turn it off. And I think especially online, I mean, you read something, oh, you can just open your browser, you're on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really big problem. I totally agree with you. And if you didn't read the book Deep Work from Cal Newport, it's my favorite book.
Can you please repeat the name?
I can share it in the chat.
Okay, thank you so much for your full answer.
Thank you so much. While you're sharing, I have to ask if someone else willing to ask their question, if they think some questions were not elaborated enough, or they have specific questions to Fabian, this is the time when you can ask that question. And if you don't have any questions, then maybe you can share the digitalization process of your country, like how digitalization actually affected your country and which areas you think it has the strongest presence. And in this regard, it would be interesting, because we already touched this topic and we understand that this process differs from country to country, from region to region. If there's something that you would like to share with us, just to have an insight of how this process happens in your country. Maya, would you like to share a couple of words?
Saida, just to step in, there's one more question.
Okay, then maybe you can take a second to think, and we will be we'll be having a question.
Hi there, Vedat here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Fabian. I'm also working in the healthcare section, where we also use an algorithm and have a device which is for QA in radiation therapy. And my question would be, I know that machine learning or AI would be much better for us, because we have also big data, and this goes hand in hand with the AI. But how do we know that the decision this AI will make based on the data is correct? Because we also know from the like Tesla, they are also implementing cars that drive on their own, but they sometimes have a wrong decision, which can be a big risk. So how can you ensure that the AI learns the right things and not the wrong things?
First of all, you cannot ensure it. But looking at statistics, if you look, like, of course, like, everything makes mistakes. I think there's nothing on this world that has a probability of 100%. But if you look at statistics, like if you look how many people in US driving how many miles, how many accidents occur, and then compare it to a Tesla, saying, okay, of course something occurs, but like the rate or the ratio is much lower. So for me, it's still an improvement. Obviously, if a human does a mistake, you know, this human did this mistake, so his insurance gonna pay, which makes it super difficult when you implement an algorithm to say, who is it, the developer that is now that we need to process? Is it the one that installed it? I think this question is much more important, because I think the algorithms will be better if you train them well, but if they will still do mistakes, you know.
Yes.
I think if you find something that doesn't make mistakes, anything in the world, be my guest. I'm the first one buying it, you know. But just looking at on a mathematical way, this doesn't exist. There's never a 100% chance for anything, in my opinion. So I would always benchmark seeing where are we now and where do we, like, could we improve from where we are? Could we reduce the error rate? Especially for me, it's super interesting because what we do with my company that I have is exactly this. Like, we see applications within different industries, for example, healthcare, and we help them to train machine learning models to improve their processes. So perhaps I share my email here in the chat. Perhaps we could also have a different chat about it, and you can show me a bit more in detail what you plan or what you would like to do. Would be really interesting.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you for this question.
Yeah,
and
thank you too.
You have another question, and I'm going to give a word to Naomi. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. So my question would be, if, in your opinion, could digitalization take a part in building, in a way, more democratic societies in the future, or it would cause more like anti-democratic processes and more division between the people? Like, okay, there are the people who has the devices, and there are the people who don't, and they would be more and more excluded. So I'm curious if you think it will lead to division and exclusion of people, or like the integration of a wider audience and citizens in the process of decision making. Yes.
Interesting question. I think that the exclusion would, like, I think it's not people having devices or people having not devices, more people perhaps knowing how to use devices good, like our generations perhaps, versus people that are a bit older and actually only using the device as a telephone, and then always say, oh, I don't want to have to do anything with this digital stuff. I heard this sentence a lot from older people in my environment. This could cause perhaps a big gap somehow. But on the other side, I think more that, like, if you, especially looking Facebook, Instagram, looking at how like fake news and everything is affecting things already, I think the biggest thing that can happen is that we are too slowly to see in advance what these great things can also have for negative consequences. Like, if you would have known perhaps what fake news are like 5 to 10 years ago, or being more aware about it, that it could be such a phenomenon, like splitting people and really spreading anger of these platforms, perhaps you would have started much, much earlier to think about how to suppress it, or how to show it much, much earlier. This is fake news, in a time where people would have accepted this, because now you can say it's fake news. They will say, oh, it's the fake guys saying that it's fake news because they don't want the truth to become true. So I think it's very a matter of also, when you as a platform, or also like people that are in charge, really realize what could be a threat as early as possible. I think this is the most, for me, it's the biggest impact they can have to see that it's going in the right direction. Obviously, you can never tell because you can never foresee all the things, but I think still thinking about it and trying to reduce this in the early stage is the best way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. If there's anyone interested, there was something else you would like to know. If not, then I can give a floor to some of the participants if they would like to share about the digitalization in their region, country. And is there anyone interested? Michelle?
I find it interesting, coming back to the part of the health management at the moment, especially now in COVID times, how different the procedures are in each country, and not the testing itself, but how we treat the data, how do we collect the data, Like for example, in Luxembourg, you just scan, you go with a paper, you scan everything, and then you receive everything digital. Whereas I know in Germany, you would need to go, and it takes a lot of time. It's all paperwork. There's not so much digital in there. So I'm just wondering if there are any other countries, and if you know how, now to all participants, if it's how it's done in your country. Yes, Maya?
Uh, okay, according for digitalization, I can say, for example, in my country, I'm from Kazakhstan. Our president just told to all of us that the next year will be a digitalization year for our country, and we are just not developed. We are a developing country, and we are just using in medicine, in different spheres, in education, of course. Nowadays we use Zoom platforms, other devices to teach children, students at universities. According, as I just mentioned, it's about tourism sphere, because I'm just a PhD in this sphere, and I'm interested in it. I just want to ask how it's influenced, for example, in other countries. For example, in my country, we are just thought how to improve this sphere. And now I, with my team, working on the project of our by our government. We're just creating a mobile app and a website for tourists around the world to invite them to our country. And it will be like a big platform which is include different tourism agencies, associations in our country, and it will be easy to use. For example, what kind of restaurant or hotel you can choose. It's like a booking.com platform, and but I think for the first time it will be very hard to improve it to international market. But first, we just want to improve it in our region. So we're just thinking about the 3D tours, QR codes to use it, and just making beautiful videos according our places, and just to invite a lot of tourists to our region this way.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you for this insight. It's interesting because I think that here in Russia, a lot of the efforts on digitalization right now focus on trying to transform the governmental structure into something more digitalized, more like an e-government. But I take it's gonna be a long process. I hope they're gonna digitalize the post office services. You know, this is something I've been personally struggling a lot with the COVID-19 situation. You know, one delivery of post, it takes up to half year to arrive, which was usually just a couple of days. So you see some areas seems to be progressing, and some areas seems to be left behind. So hopefully we're all gonna come to the point when this process is balanced in our society in different spheres, because it seems to be that this balanced matter of progress and development might be giving us some consequences that we not want to face. So on this note, I guess if there is no other participants willing to share their thoughts on the digitalization in their country, I would be happy to say a big thank you to our speaker Fabian, who left to be the only one speaker today and took all of the courage to answer all of this big list of questions coming from myself and Michelle and all of you guys. So a huge appreciation and an applause round for you, and I give the word to Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure, and it was a pleasure to answer the questions. and yeah, to talk to you guys.
Thank you all. Thank you, Seide, for hosting this together with me. Thank you, Fabian. Great. First of all, thank you for being here, for also being so flexible. And also thank you for all the participants who also were able to commit today and show up. And I wish you all a very nice night. Hope to see you in one of the next events. And also enjoy the weekend because it's very close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Have a good night. Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye, guys.